The words just hung there in the air, cold and sharp. Your position has been eliminated. My hand flew to my stomach, a reflex to protect the tiny life I was carrying, a secret joy I'd shared with my boss just weeks before. He didn't just fire me. He tried to tell me that my future, my career, and my baby were liabilities. What he didn't know was that in trying to put out my flame, he handed me a torch. This is the story of how I went from being a pregnant, unemployed problem to the woman who would one day own the very company that kicked me to the curb. Before my world blew up, it was, honestly, perfect. For 5 years, I was the senior strategist at Apex Innovations, a marketing firm with the ambition of a great white shark. And I was their sharpest tooth. My job wasn't just a 9 to 5, I loved it. I lived and breathed brand ecosystems and market disruption. I was the one who stayed late, who saw angles no one else did, who could walk into a room with a nervous client and walk out with a signed, multi-year contract. My boss, Mark, wasn't just a supervisor. I thought of him as a mentor. He had a brilliant, if ruthless, business mind. He'd taken me under his wing when I was just a junior analyst and championed my rise. Sarah, he'd often say, clapping me on the shoulder after a big win, you're the engine in this place. Don't ever forget that. I took so much pride in that. I felt seen, I felt valued. My loyalty to Apex and to Mark was absolute. We were a team, climbing a mountain together, and the view from the top was going to be amazing. I was the lead on our biggest account, the Harrison Group. I had grown that relationship from a cold call and a prayer into the company's single largest source of revenue. It was my baby. I knew their team, their goals, and their challenges inside and out. My work on that account was the stuff of company legend, the benchmark for all other projects. I was on a clear path to partnership. I wasn't just climbing the ladder, I felt like I was building my own wing of the building. Then, one crisp autumn morning, everything changed. 2 pink lines on a little plastic stick. Pregnant. After the first wave of pure shock, this incredible joy settled over me. A baby. My husband, Tom, and I were over the moon. We had been trying for a while, and this felt like the final, perfect piece of our life falling into place. I held my little secret close for a few weeks, but I knew I had to tell Mark, especially with the big Harrison Group strategic summit coming up during my second trimester. I wasn't worried. If anything, I was excited to share the news. Mark was a family man with 2 kids of his own. I figured he'd be thrilled for me. He knew my work ethic, a baby wasn't going to change that. I even mapped out my maternity leave, how I'd delegate tasks, and my plan to hit the ground running when I returned. I was being the proactive star employee he always said I was. I scheduled a meeting, my heart buzzing with happy energy. I walked into his glass-walled office, the same place we'd celebrated so many wins, and sat down with a huge smile. I thought I was sharing the start of a beautiful new chapter. I had no idea I was walking into a tragedy. Mark, I have some wonderful personal news, I began, my voice full of excitement. Tom and I are expecting a baby. For a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. It wasn't joy. It wasn't congratulations. It was cold. Calculating. But just as fast as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a wide, fake smile. Sarah. That's fantastic. Congratulations, just wonderful news. He stood up, gave me a handshake that was a little too firm, and asked all the right questions. When are you due? How are you feeling? All the while, his eyes were somewhere else. He was running numbers. Assessing risk. I wasn't his star player anymore. I was a problem. The shift was subtle at first, so subtle I thought I might be imagining it. An email I wasn't copied on. A hallway meeting about a new client I wasn't invited to. When I asked about it, the excuses were smooth. "Oh, that was just a preliminary chat, Sarah. Didn't want to bog you down." Or, "We know you've got your hands full with Harrison." Then came the first real blow. The Harrison Group Summit, the one I'd been planning for months, was taken away from me. Mark called me into his office, his face a careful mask of concern. "Sarah, I've been thinking," he said, leaning back in his chair. "That summit is going to be a lot of travel and long hours, right when you'll be in your third trimester. I don't want to put that stress on you. I'm going to have James take the lead. You can brief him." A chill shot down my spine. "Mark, I appreciate the concern, but I'm perfectly capable of handling it. My doctor says I'm fine, the travel is minimal, and I've already built the entire strategy." "It's not about your capability, it's about your well-being," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "James will do fine." It was a knife in the back, wrapped in a phony blanket of kindness. He was using my pregnancy as an excuse to sideline me from my own biggest success. James was fine, but he didn't have the relationship or the deep knowledge I had. The Harrison Group was my account. But the decision was made. I spent the next week in agony, handing over years of my work, my strategy, and my contacts to someone else. Every question James asked felt like another piece of my professional soul being carved away. After that, the walls closed in fast. My other projects were rebalanced to lighten my load. My input in meetings was ignored. I was being systematically erased from the company I helped build. I started documenting everything: the condescending comments, the project reassignments, the emails I was suddenly left off of. I kept a detailed log, forwarding key emails to my personal account. A part of me knew this was going downhill fast. The day it happened was a grey, rainy Tuesday. Mark called me into his office at 4:45 p.m. The head of HR was already sitting in the corner, her face a perfect blank. I knew. "Sarah," Mark began, avoiding my eyes. "As you know, the industry is shifting, and we've had to reevaluate our long-term needs. As part of a necessary restructuring, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position." "Eliminate my position?" I repeated. The words felt like a foreign language. "I'm the senior strategist. I handle our largest account." "What are you talking about?" "The role of senior strategist is being absorbed into a new team structure," he said, basically reading from a script. "Your contributions have been appreciated, but your role is now redundant." Redundant? After 5 years of being his engine. 6 weeks after telling him I was pregnant. "This is because I'm pregnant," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Mark's face hardened. "This is a business decision, Sarah. It has nothing to do with your personal situation. To even suggest that is unprofessional." The gaslighting was stunning. He stripped me of my projects and my job, and now he was calling me unprofessional for stating the obvious. The HR rep slid a folder across the table. "A severance agreement. A few weeks' pay if I signed away my right to sue him." I looked at Mark, the man I had once admired, and saw a coward hiding behind corporate jargon. I stood up, my legs trembling. I didn't cry. I would not give him the satisfaction. I pushed the unsigned agreement back across the table. "I'll have my lawyer look at this," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I never knew I had. I turned and walked out of his office, past the silent stares of my co-workers, my hand on my stomach. I walked out of the building and into the rain. I was no longer Sarah, the star strategist. I was just Sarah, 14 weeks pregnant and unemployed. The first 24 hours were a blur. I drove home in a daze, the windshield wipers chanting, "Eliminated, eliminated." The second I walked through the door, Tom saw my face and knew. I collapsed into his arms, and the tears I'd refused to shed in that office came out in a flood of grief and fury. After the shock, the panic set in. Cold, hard, financial panic. We had a mortgage and a baby on the way. My salary was the bigger of our two incomes. Our savings were for a nursery and maternity leave, not to keep us from going under. I spent days on the couch, bouncing between rage, despair, and pure humiliation. Every baby commercial on TV felt like a sick joke. My confidence was completely shattered. Mark hadn't just taken my job, he had convinced me he was right, that because I was becoming a mother, I was worthless. About a week later, Tom sat me down. "You can't let him win," he said. "This isn't just you anymore. It's our family. You are the most brilliant person I know. He fired you because he's a coward and an idiot, not because of your performance." That was the spark I needed. My grief started to harden into resolve. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to fight. My first thought was to get another job. I polished my resume, it was packed with huge wins. On paper, I was a dream candidate. The phone interviews went great. Recruiters were impressed. But then came the video calls. By this point, I was starting to show, and believe me, they noticed. I learned you don't have to disclose a pregnancy, and they legally can't ask. But they have their ways. I'd get questions like, "What are your goals for the next 5 years?" Or, "We need someone with uninterrupted commitment." The subtext was deafening. One interview was especially brutal. It was with a fast-growing tech startup. The final round was with the CEO. We had a great chat, he was excited about my ideas. Then, as we were wrapping up, his eyes flickered down to my stomach. Just for a second. The warmth vanished. He ended the meeting abruptly. The next day, I got the automated rejection email. It happened again and again. Great calls followed by a sudden chill and a rejection. It was soul-crushing. Each no felt like Mark's verdict being confirmed: you are a liability. Being judged not on your talent, but on your body, is a special kind of awful. I was qualified and ready to work, but all they saw was an inconvenience. The struggle was immense, not just financially, but emotionally. I was fighting a silent battle against an unspoken bias, and I was losing. I was months into my pregnancy, my savings were draining, and my confidence was shot. One night, staring at another rejection email, I just broke down. I felt powerless. Tom sat with me and said something that changed everything. "What Mark did wasn't just unfair," he said. "It was illegal. You should be fighting him, not begging his competitors for a job." He was right. I'd been so focused on replacing what I lost that I hadn't focused on the injustice of it all. That night, I didn't open LinkedIn. I opened Google. I dove headfirst into legal websites and employee rights forums. The more I read, the angrier I got. That's when I really learned about the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, PDA. I read the words over and over. It's an amendment to the Civil Rights Act that says employers with 15 or more employees can't discriminate based on pregnancy. They can't fire you, demote you, or refuse to hire you because you're pregnant. I'm not a lawyer, but what Mark did, sidelining me, faking a restructuring, and firing me right after my announcement, seemed like a textbook violation. I also discovered the newer Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, PWFA, which went into effect in June 2023. It requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations for pregnant workers. Mark hadn't just failed to accommodate me, he'd actively pushed me out. The path forward was suddenly clear. I had to file a charge with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. I learned you don't always need a lawyer to start the process, but the most important thing was the deadline. You usually have to file within 180 days of the discrimination, though it can be extended to 300 days in some states. I wasn't waiting. The fire was lit. I spent the next 2 days building my case. That secret log I kept was my foundation: dates, times, direct quotes, and the email chains showing me being pushed out. Reliving it all was painful, but with every word I typed, I felt my power returning. I filed my charge online through the EEOC portal. It was done. A few weeks later, I got confirmation that Apex Innovations had been formally notified. I could just imagine the panic in Mark's office. He thought a measly severance check would make me disappear. He never thought I'd fight back with the full weight of federal law. I learned the EEOC investigation could take a long time, maybe 10 months, or even more. But I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. The job hunt had taught me a bitter lesson: the traditional job market was closed to me. So if no one would hire me, I would hire myself. The idea started as a whisper and grew into a roar. What was my greatest asset? My strategic mind. The very thing Apex had paid me 6 figures for. From my kitchen table, with my growing belly and a second-hand laptop, I launched Phoenix Consulting. The name felt right. My mission was simple: offer the smart, agile marketing strategy that bloated firms like Apex couldn't. My first client was a small local business. The pay was a tiny fraction of my old salary, but it was a start. I gave them the Harrison Group treatment, and they were thrilled. They referred me to someone else. Slowly, I started to build a reputation. When my daughter was born, I took exactly 1 week off. I worked during her naps, with her sleeping on my chest. I wasn't just building a business for myself anymore. I was building an empire for her. Phoenix Consulting grew faster than I ever imagined. Within a year, I hired my first contractor. A year after that, I had a small team and a real office. I was no longer Sarah, the fired employee. I was Sarah, the CEO. And I was just getting started. The next 2 years were a blur. Phoenix Consulting didn't just survive, it thrived. We became known as the Giant Killers, winning clients from bigger firms, because we were faster, smarter, and more dedicated. Our company culture was built on everything I'd been denied: flexibility, trust, and valuing people for their work, not their life circumstances. We proved you could be successful and humane. Meanwhile, I started hearing whispers about Apex Innovations. The Harrison Group had dropped them. Without my leadership, my replacement had fumbled the account. Losing their biggest client left a hole in their revenue they couldn't fill. Other clients followed. The whole machine was sputtering. My EEOC case was slowly moving through mediation, but Apex's offers were insulting. Mark still didn't take me seriously. He thought he could make me go away for pennies. I refused every offer. Time, I realized, was on my side. Then, the call came. It was from a business broker. "Sarah," he said, "I've got something you might find interesting. A firm is looking for a quiet acquisition. They're in distress, but have good bones. The name is Apex Innovations." I almost dropped the phone. Mark was selling the sinking ship. The asking price was a fraction of what the company had been worth. A fire sale. A wicked, brilliant, crazy idea started to form. For 3 years, I had poured every penny of profit back into Phoenix. We were lean, successful, and had cash. What if I took the idea to my team. It was nuts. It was audacious. It was poetic justice on a scale I'd never dared to imagine. Using the success I built from my own ashes to swallow them whole. It was perfect. Our due diligence showed the financials were a mess, but the good bones were there. My lawyers got excited about a complex legal concept called successor liability. Basically, under the right conditions, the company buying the assets can also acquire its legal liabilities. My EEOC claim was a huge liability hanging over Apex. We structured the offer so Phoenix would acquire Apex's assets and its liabilities, including my own discrimination claim. It was a long shot, a masterstroke of legal strategy. The day of the final meeting is burned into my memory. I walked into the same Apex boardroom where I'd been fired. But this time, I was the buyer. Across the massive table sat Mark, looking 10 years older. He saw me, and his jaw went slack. The look on his face, shock, humiliation, and dawning horror, was better than any settlement check. He had no idea I was the buyer until that exact moment. Our lawyers did the talking. Mark just sat there, silent. When it was time to sign, I picked up the pen and looked right at him. "Mark," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "You told me once that firing me was just a business decision. Well, this is my business decision." I signed the papers that made me the owner of his company. One of my first acts, as the new owner, was to resolve the company's outstanding legal liabilities. We had our legal team draft a settlement for my EEOC claim. My new, parent company would pay out a substantial, 7-figure settlement for wrongful termination and discrimination. The money was paid by the company I now owned, directly to me. I had effectively forced my old boss's company to pay for its own destruction. Mark was terminated immediately. No severance. His position, I noted in the official paperwork, had been eliminated as part of a necessary restructuring. Today, I walk the halls of my company. We merged the best of Apex into Phoenix, rebranding as Phoenix Innovations. I sit in Mark's old office, though it's been completely redecorated. The dark, intimidating furniture is gone, replaced with bright, open spaces. Our culture is my greatest pride. We champion working parents. We have childcare subsidies and the best parental leave policy in our industry. We built a place where no one has to choose between their family and their career. What happened to me was devastating and unjust. But it led me here. It forced me to find a strength I didn't know I had and to build something of my own. This journey wasn't just about revenge, though I admit, that part was incredibly sweet. It was about taking my power back, and rewriting the narrative that a woman's worth goes down when she decides to be a mother. If you are going through something similar, please know this: you are not a liability. Your pregnancy is a source of power, not a weakness. I am not a lawyer, and my story is not legal advice, but I encourage you to learn about your rights. Document everything. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act and the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act are more than just words on paper, they are shields. The EEOC is a tool you can use. Don't be afraid to fight for yourself. Sometimes, the worst thing that ever happens to you can be the very thing that sets you free. Thank you for listening. If my story resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd like and subscribe. And please, share your own stories of workplace injustice or triumph in the comments below. Let's build a community where we empower each other.